All right. So my dad's in the hospital. So this week, so today I had to cancel. He's supposed to be getting a kidney procedure done. He was in the hospital all weekend, so I really didn't have a whole lot of work prepped. What I'd like you guys to do, aside from watching this video, is to watch the video on Usual Suspects, which is a Tom Shakespeare video about the experience of disability and cultural perceptions. It's very good, and I'll have a quiz up on Wednesday about it, as well as a journal. I would like you to take this time, since you're not in class, to maybe get together with your groups. I really want this Wednesday any more of your faces' bios. At this point, if you don't have a bio, just let me know why you couldn't get it done. If it was because people on the other side didn't communicate with you or whatever. But I'd really like to collect them all by the end of this week, so I can give them to the state next week. All right. So the idea in your book this week, the readings were your readings I gave assigned for you for homework last week were about work and disability in work, and in particular, I kind of wanted to focus on the second article in the Americans with Disability book, and that's the Kafka article. And Kafka makes a very interesting argument that we have a moral right to work. By the way, that's my cat. I'm sorry. She's incredibly obnoxious. But this idea that there's a moral imperative to work. And he writes in here, my argument will aim at showing that disabled people should be accorded a legal right to work. Disabled people's right to work is prima facie, not absolute. It can in principle be overridden by competing rights or other considerations, such as economic feasibility. But it is, I will contend, a strong prima facie right. The moral argument in its favor are substantial enough that it would take competing moral considerations of considerable weight to override it. So basically his argument is that because of the way our society views work, stemming from the fact that we use the Protestant work ethic, this idea of work is part of our identity, part of our self-conceptions. Without work, we view ourselves as less than. So his argument is that as a society, we can't just say to people with disabilities, I'm pensioning you off. We're going to give you money, go relax and don't worry about it. Because we as a society view work as such a moral imperative, such as an identity issue, we are robbing those individuals of potential identity. So we as a society cannot have pensioning off as our first priority. We should instead utilize how we can allow that individual to work. What are the circumstances blocking their ability to work? And that we need to basically level the playing field and allow them the ability to participate fully in society if we want to allow them to consider themselves fully human based on our American society. So the argument here is one that we seem to have problems with in America because for the most part, many of our social welfare programs are tied with extreme poverty. This idea of the worthy poor. The individuals that need a helping hand have to really need it in America. And so we have all of our social welfare programs tied up with the concept of extreme poverty. So for many of our healthcare programs, Medicaid being the big one, and Medicaid is the big one because America has turned Medicaid into not a health insurance, but a health care program. There's a big difference between the two. Health insurance is just pay for services rendered by a physician that's considered medically necessary. A health care program is worried about keeping the individual not just alive and functioning, but keeping them able to flourish. So Medicaid turns around and covers not just the medically necessary minor things, but the more experimental, the more optional things like personal assistant care, motorized wheelchairs. There's no reason medically that I should be in this $80,000 Permobil chair. Now, the doctors can argue, oh, it allows me to relieve my pressure and stuff like that. But to a certain extent, Medicare would argue that I don't need to get out of bed, that all of that could be done in a hospital bed for $1,800. So that has always been the previous, before Medicaid's real movement into healthcare, that had been the previous design. But Medicaid has turned into a healthcare program that looks at a holistic being, and that includes making sure that the individual can be part of the community, hence the motorized wheelchair, and other things, the assistant care, being able to stay in your home rather than being in an institution. So all of those items are now covered by Medicaid, but not any other insurance out there. So individuals that are severely disabled, the autistic autistic adult that needs the assistant care to help them function and communicate, that individual gets that service through Medicaid, but not through any other program. So, in order to get to Medicaid, you have to have extreme poverty in America. They are moving slightly away from that. There's now a workability program that allows you to maintain Medicaid. You have a severe disability, and you need the Medicaid-only services, and still allow you to work. But even that's limited. $50,000 is not a lot of money for most people. If you're going to buy a house and have a car and all the other life adventures, $50,000 doesn't go very far. And that's the max that Medicaid allows. So it still is a poverty program. It's widened a little bit, but not too much. And part of that is because of this work ethic. But it's positive to allow people to start to work and to look at work as a moral imperative. However, there is a downside to this as well. And we're seeing that happening right now. The woman that may be put in charge of Obamacare, Health and Human Services Secretary to replace Tom Price, is a woman who in Indiana, where she was the Medicaid overseer, had put in place a program which allowed people on the Medicaid expansion of the Affordable Care Act, but gave them a work requirement, just like welfare has. So now those individuals must work or show a severe enough disability to get out of it. And that's a pretty hard bridge to jump, particularly in the definition of disability. If you have an invisible disability, a mental health issue, it becomes much more difficult to claim that you're unable to work at all. So we have two battling issues here, and that's what I want you guys to focus on. What is the role of work in the disabled? Should we be requiring disabled to work? Should we hold services back if they don't? Or should we say that we don't have enough room in the market now for workers? We still have unemployment. So therefore should be like what Roosevelt did, take those individuals out of the market and pension them off. And a lot of countries do that. They force individuals with disabilities to be pensioned off and not work so that there is room in the marketplace for others. That's the real question. That was the whole principle behind Social Security. Let's pension the older people off so that we can get rid of them and allow younger generation to get a job. There's a joke if you go to academic advising and you say, I'd like to be a gym teacher. Academic advising will tell you, your chances are only if the gym teacher that's employed now dies or retires. And even retirement isn't a guarantee because a lot of times they will never retire. In fact, Emma usually, in advising, usually jokes that even if they're dead, she thinks that they just stuff them and keep them in the gym still teaching. So, this idea of replacing the workforce becomes an issue. So you look at those different substantial issues as you're going through, and we're going to talk about this problem of work and disability and the law on disability. How much should an employer be responsible for? Oh, crap. Okay, no, it's still typing. I thought my video shut off, but it didn't. All right, I will see you guys on Wednesday. Please try to get your work done and let me know if you have any troubles. I'm just an email or a text away. Please utilize both of them and let me know if you have any questions or issues. In the meantime, be ready to talk about the work chapter on from the Americans with Disabilities book. And for homework this week, you're going to be reading the next chapter, which is on healthcare. So Americans with Disabilities, Part C, and it's going to be the chapter on health. Once again, very difficult topic. All right, we will meet on Wednesday. Bye.